Usually when we talk about like a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute precision.
Right, yeah.
It's almost like engineering. Like you break your arm, you go to the hospital, they do an X-ray, and it shows that jagged white line on the screen.
Yeah, it's right there.
Yeah, and the doctor just points at it and says, there it is. That's the problem.
It's entirely binary. I mean, it is clear-cut, visible, it's perfectly categorized.
Yeah.
Broken or not broken.
Right. Broken or not broken, it's clean.
Yeah.
But then you step into the world of human emotions.
Oh, yeah. That's where it all falls apart.
Completely falls apart. And specifically, the ways we try to cope with our emotions. And suddenly that X-ray machine is just completely broken.
It's useless.
We are looking at a behavioral landscape that is, frankly, entirely murky.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to ask you, the listener, have you ever noticed that the very things you do to manage stress or anxiety or anger in the heat of the moment?
The quick fixes, yeah.
Right, the quick fixes. Have you noticed they often end up making your life so much harder in the long run? Like you try to fix the feeling and you end up breaking the reality.
I mean, it is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. The solutions we naturally reach for become the actual problem.
Yeah.
And, well, that paradox is exactly what we are dissecting today.
Exactly. So we're venturing into what we could think of as the third floor of a metaphorical house of mental skills.
Right, going all the way up.
Yeah, so if the first and second floors are about basic emotional awareness and cognitive flexibility, which, are huge topics on their own.
Massive topics.
Today, we are taking the stairs right up to the top. We are looking at countering emotional behaviors.
Which is so crucial.
It is. We really need to figure out why we instinctively run from or fight our own feelings, how these deeply sneaky behaviors manifest in our everyday lives, and crucially, how we rewrite our own behavioral scripts.
Because you cannot simply think your way out of a feeling. I mean, people try.
Oh, they try all the time.
Right, but at a certain point, your actions, the literal physical things you do with your body and your time, they dictate your emotional reality.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because what exactly is an emotional behavior? Let's establish the biological foundation here before we get into the messy ways we employ them. Because whether you, listening right now, are prepping for a high-stakes meeting at work or, I don't know.
You're stuck in traffic.
Yeah. You are just trying to navigate a frustrating bumper-to-bumper commute without completely losing your mind.
We've all been there.
We have. And understanding this mechanism is essentially a cheat code. It is how you get unstuck from those negative loops that just drain your energy day after day.
It really is. So at its core, an emotional behavior is simply an action we take to manage an emotion.
Okay.
But to understand why we do them, we have to look backward. I mean, these behaviors, they do not start out as character flaws or like psychological failures.
Right. We tend to judge ourselves so harshly for them.
We do, but they start out as deeply ingrained evolutionary survival tools. In psychology, we refer to these as action tendencies.
Action tendencies, meaning the emotion doesn't just like sit there in your chest. It naturally comes with a physical urge to take a specific action.
Exactly. Every single emotion is hardwired to a specific behavioral urge.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's look at sadness. When you experience profound sadness, the natural action tendency is withdrawal.
Like just wanting to pull the covers over your head.
Right, exactly. And if we look at that through an evolutionary lens, you have to ask, why does that happen?
Why do we want to hide?
Because withdrawing allows an individual the necessary time and space to process a significant loss. I mean, it literally physically slows your metabolism down. It forces you to retreat.
Oh, wow. Right. So you aren't supposed to be out hunting or throwing a party when you need to physically and mentally heal.
Precisely. You need to conserve energy.
Right.
Or consider anger. Anger motivates defense.
Fight mode.
Right. It floods your system with adrenaline. It pushes blood to your extremities. It basically prepares you to physically protect yourself or your loved ones when you've been wronged.
That makes total sense.
And anxiety, which gets an incredibly terrible reputation in modern society.
Oh, the worst reputation. We all hate feeling anxious.
We do, but it is actually one of our most helpful emotions in its pure form.
Wait, really? Helpful?
Absolutely.
Huh.
Because anxiety motivates preparation or the avoidance of threatening stimuli.
Okay, I see.
Like feeling anxious before a major presentation is the exact biological mechanism that prompts you to stay up and practice your speech to ensure you don't fail.
So if I'm walking in the woods alone and I hear crunching leaves, and I look up, and I suddenly see a massive grizzly bear on the trail ahead of me.
A classic example.
Right. Feeling absolutely terrified, my heart spiking to like 180 beats per minute, and running away. That avoidance is highly adaptive. That's a good thing.
It's the best thing.
Yeah, I shouldn't try to quote-unquote counter that emotional behavior.
No, please do not counter that. You should definitely run from the bear.
Good to know.
The action tendency there, fleeing a predator, is entirely justified by what is objectively happening in reality.
Because the bear will eat me.
Exactly. There is a present immediate threat that could result in a considerable degree of physical harm. Your brain sounds a literal alarm, your amygdala takes over, you feel fear, you run, you survive. The system works perfectly.
But I'm guessing this perfectly tuned evolutionary system, this biological alarm bell, it goes completely haywire in the modern world.
It does. It goes spectacularly haywire. And this brings us to the core mechanism that causes so much unnecessary human suffering,
Which is?
the false alarm.
Ah, okay, let's define the false alarm, because I feel like this is kind of the hinge for everything else we're going to talk about today.
It really is the foundation. So a false alarm occurs when your brain's threat detection system misinterprets a non-lethal modern situation as a life-or-death survival scenario.
Like what?
Well, what happens when your brain perceives your boss calling you into their office for constructive feedback as a grizzly bear?
Oh, man. The physical alarm bells ring just as loudly, right? My heart rate spikes, my palms sweat, I get that tunnel vision.
Exactly.
But the threat isn't actually going to eat me, it's just my boss.
Right. The physiological cascade is identical to seeing the bear. Your adrenal glands pump out cortisol and adrenaline.
Wow.
But if a true physical threat is not present and you are experiencing a false alarm, then engaging in those primitive survival behaviors becomes completely maladaptive.
Because it doesn't match the situation.
Exactly. The level of anger or fear you feel and the subsequent urge to fight or flee, it is not justified by what is actually happening in the room. But your body, it doesn't know that. It simply feels the chemical urge.
So running away from the bear keeps me alive.
Yes.
But running away from my boss's feedback, I mean, it might make my heart rate go down in the next 5 minutes, which feels like a relief.
Oh, it feels great in the moment.
Right. But it's going to completely sabotage my career in the long run.
And that is the trap. That is the exact trap. Behaviors that are entirely adaptive in a life or death scenario become the exact things that maintain and deepen our emotional struggles in modern social or professional settings.
Because you're treating an email like a predator.
Yes. You are reacting to a psychological false alarm with a very real, physical, consequential behavior.
You know, avoiding a literal bear is obvious. If I see one, I run. But human emotional behaviors, especially the ones we use to manage these modern false alarms, they seem to evolve.
Oh, they get very clever.
Yeah, they mutate into these incredibly subtle, almost invisible habits. We essentially have an entire taxonomy of avoidance.
We do.
It's like a field guide to how we hide from our own feelings. So I want to trace this evolution, starting with the most obvious behaviors and moving to the ones that are so sneaky, we don't even realize we're doing them.
That's a vital progression to understand, because identifying which of these hiding spots you default to, well, it's the foundational step in changing your own behavioral scripts.
Okay, let's start with the most immediate, visceral reactions, what are known as emotion-driven behaviors, or EDBs.
Right. So emotion-driven behaviors are actions propelled by highly intense, acute emotions.
Okay.
They are specifically designed by your brain to reduce the intensity of that emotion as quickly as physically possible.
I'm thinking about how this looks in practice, because it feels completely involuntary in the moment, you know?
It does. It feels like a reflex.
Yeah. The best way to describe engaging in an EDB is that it's like scratching an itch.
That is the most accurate physiological metaphor we have. Think about when you have a severe mosquito bite.
Oh, the worst.
Right. Scratching it does absolutely nothing to cure the bite. In fact, it actively makes it worse.
Just tear up your skin.
Exactly. It inflames the tissue. It might introduce bacteria and cause an infection. It drastically prolongs the healing process. But in that fraction of a second, the release of tension feels incredibly, undeniably good.
You almost can't stop yourself.
You can't.
Right,
It feels like a biological necessity to scratch it.
So what does scratching the emotional itch look like?
Well, let's say.
Like, if I've had a brutal day at work, and I'm carrying all this unexpressed frustration, and I walk through the front door and immediately snap at my partner over something totally trivial.
Right, like a pair of shoes left in the hallway.
Yes, exactly. I know yelling at them won't solve the fact that my boss was a jerk, But yelling releases that built-up tension in my chest for about 2 seconds.
Yes. The short-term consequence is tension relief. You scratched the itch.
But the long-term costs.
The long-term consequence, of course, is that you've now damaged your relationship, you've created a hostile home environment, and you will inevitably feel a secondary wave of guilt and shame later on.
Which is another negative emotion.
Exactly. The itch comes back, but now it's infected.
I also see this a lot with apologizing, which is, fascinating because we usually think of apologizing as this pro-social, empathetic, good thing to do.
It is, usually, until it crosses the line into an emotion-driven behavior meant merely to reduce your own internal anxiety rather than to genuinely repair a social rupture.
Oh, I see.
If you are terrified that someone is mad at you or that you've made a mistake, you might apologize 10 times in a single hour.
Right. I'm so sorry, did I ruin everything? Loop. We all know someone who does that.
Exactly. Or we've done it ourselves.
Sure.
And short-term consequence. You feel a momentary drop in anxiety, and you might extract some immediate reassurance from the other person. They say, it's fine, really, stop apologizing.
And you feel better for a minute.
For a minute. But what is the long-term consequence? People get incredibly fatigued having to constantly manage your anxiety and provide endless reassurance.
It's exhausting for them.
It is. It creates friction, which, ironically, eventually causes them to pull away, confirming your initial terrified belief that you are annoying them or doing something quote-unquote bad.
Wow. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It really is.
Other EDBs would be things like pouring a massive glass of wine the second you get home to take the edge off a stressful day.
Classic EDB.
Or repeatedly checking the locks on your front door because you have a spike of intrusive anxiety about a break-in.
Yes.
It's all about forceful, immediate reduction of an emotional spike.
Correct. You are forcefully resetting the system in the moment, regardless of the tomorrow cost.
Okay, so that's the immediate reaction. But what if the emotional threat isn't a sudden spike? What if it's a known, looming situation?
Like something on your calendar.
Yeah. That brings us to outright physical flight, overt avoidance.
Right. Overt avoidance is exactly what it sounds like. It is completely removing yourself from the equation.
You just bolt.
Essentially, yes. You identify a situation, a person, or a place that triggers a strong, uncomfortable emotion, and you simply engineer your life so that you never encounter it.
Like deciding you are never, ever going to take the subway again because you had a panic attack on a train once.
It's a perfect example.
And you're terrified of having another one in an enclosed space. So now you walk an hour and a half to work every day, or you spend a fortune on ride shares.
Or simply not attending a social gathering because of social anxiety.
Just RSVPing no to everything.
Exactly. Or calling in sick to work on the day you're supposed to give a presentation.
Oh, wow.
Or, in the case of profound depressive feelings, staying in bed all day long and refusing to engage with the world at all.
It's the ultimate boundary. You just don't show up. The threat can't hurt you if you aren't in the room.
That's the logic, yes.
But let's escalate this. Because outright avoidance isn't always an option. I mean, you can't always just quit your job when a project gets stressful or walk out of a family Thanksgiving dinner without causing a massive scene.
As much as we might want to sometimes.
Right. So what happens when you are physically trapped in the room with the emotion? This is where the behaviors get incredibly subtle. We start talking about subtle behavioral avoidance.
And this is where it gets really interesting. These are the behaviors that prevent you from fully experiencing an emotion or fully participating in a situation, when physically leaving is socially or practically impossible.
You're stuck.
You are. You are physically present, your body is in the room, but you are behaviorally checking out. You are creating a micro barrier between yourself and the experience.
Oh, I think everyone listening has done this exact thing. Imagine you're at a party. Maybe it's a networking event or a friend of a friend's birthday.
Right.
You don't know anyone. You feel that hot, prickly awkwardness. You feel anxious.
That's a worse feeling.
But you can't leave because it would be rude.
Yeah.
So you pull out your phone.
Yes, the phone.
And you stare very intensely at your emails, or you scroll through social media, projecting this aura of being, very busy and important.
It is the modern shield. You are avoiding the vulnerability of small talk, the risk of rejection, the discomfort of standing alone.
The short-term consequence is that your heart rate drops a bit. You feel less exposed because you look occupied. But the long-term consequence is catastrophic for your social life. You don't meet anyone, you make no new connections, and you cement this internal belief that people would judge you harshly if you just stood there without a prop.
which is entirely a false assumption.
Right. You survive the party, but you learn absolutely nothing about your own capacity to handle social friction.
And subtle avoidance can take much more complex forms than just looking at a screen. One of the most insidious forms of subtle avoidance is perfectionism.
Wait, really? Perfectionism?
Yes.
Because we usually reward perfectionism. We put it on our resumes like, I have a keen eye for detail.
Yeah.
How is trying to do a flawless job a form of avoidance?
It is a brilliant, socially acceptable disguise for avoiding vulnerability.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Perfectionism is entirely designed to prevent the uncomfortable, gnawing uncertainty of whether you are, quote-unquote, good enough.
Oh.
Think about it. If you submit a project that is absolutely unquestioningly flawless, you avoid the possibility of criticism. You avoid the feeling of being judged or found lacking.
So if I'm obsessing over the font size on a slide deck at 2 a.m.,
Which I'm sure you've never done.
huh? If I'm doing that, I'm not doing it because I'm a dedicated worker. I'm doing it because I'm terrified my boss will think I'm incompetent, and I'm avoiding the feeling of that potential shame.
Precisely. In the short term, obsessing over every single detail gives you a false sense of control and security.
It feels like I'm doing something productive.
It does. But in the long term, you are chaining yourself to an impossible standard. You continue to feel immense, crushing pressure for everything to be perfect, which maintains a chronic, exhausting worry.
That sounds miserable.
It is. And the worst part is, you never learn that you could submit a good enough project, receive a minor correction, and easily survive the experience.
Because you never let yourself fail even a little bit.
Right. You are avoiding the reality of human fallibility.
There's another layer to this subtle avoidance that really caught my attention in the research. Avoiding the actual physical sensations of an emotion. Interoceptive avoidance.
Yes, this is fascinating.
Say someone is terrified of having a panic attack. A panic attack involves a racing heart, shortness of breath, maybe sweating.
All physiological symptoms?
So they start subtly avoiding anything in their life that mimics those physical feelings.
Yes. They might stop drinking coffee entirely. They might stop exercising. They might avoid walking up a steep flight of stairs.
Just to keep their heart rate flat.
Because the moment their heart rate elevates organically, their brain interprets that physical sensation as the onset of panic.
Oh, wow.
They are not avoiding a situation. They are subtly avoiding their own internal physiology.
Okay, so we've talked about hiding physically by leaving the room and hiding behaviorally by looking at our phones or obsessing over details.
Right.
But what happens when you don't have your phone, you don't have a task to perfect, and you are locked in the situation? What happens when you retreat entirely into your own head?
Then we arrive at cognitive avoidance. This is when we use the machinery of our own minds to escape our feelings.
Cognitive avoidance. So this is anything you do to keep your mind off something distressing.
Exactly. Distraction is the most common form.
Like reading, listening to music, binge watching television.
Yes, but critically, not doing these things for enjoyment or relaxation. You are specifically using them as a narcotic to numb out and avoid processing a difficult situation.
It's the difference between watching a movie because you love cinema and scrolling mindlessly through short-form videos for 3 hours, because if you stop for even 5 seconds, the grief over a recent breakup will flood into your consciousness.
That's a perfect distinction. It's the intent behind the action.
Or dissociation during a conflict. Like
Yeah.
you're sitting there while your partner is upset with you.
Right.
And instead of engaging with the uncomfortable emotion of the argument, you just let your eyes glaze over and you start mentally remodeling your kitchen. You have cognitively left the building.
You're gone. But, the most counterintuitive, deeply deceptive example of cognitive avoidance is worry and rumination.
Hold on. Worrying is a way of avoiding emotion.
Yeah.
That sounds completely paradoxical, because when I'm locked in a cycle of worry, I feel like I am drowning in negative emotions. My stomach is in knots. How can that possibly be avoidance?
This is a massive trap that so many intelligent, analytical people fall into.
Okay, explain this to me.
Worrying feels productive. It mimics the mechanics of problem solving. But worry is almost always a cognitive strategy used to avoid thinking about the actual terrifying core of an issue.
Or to avoid feeling the raw emotion associated with it.
Exactly. It replaces raw, unstructured negative emotion with highly structured cognitive what-ifs.
Wait, so by worrying about 100 tiny peripheral things, I'm actually building a firewall against the one big thing I'm truly terrified of.
Yes, you are buffering the main threat.
That completely changes how I view my own anxiety. If I have a massive life-altering decision to make, say, whether to move across the country for a new job, and I'm terrified of making the wrong choice and ruining my life.
Right. A huge existential fear.
Instead of sitting with that profound, deep fear of the unknown, I might just sit there and worry endlessly about the logistics of moving companies,
Yes,
or what to do with my houseplants, or whether the new city have my favorite grocery store.
exactly. The worry about the houseplants is unpleasant, yes. But it is structured. It is manageable.
I can Google moving boxes. I can't Google will I be happy.
Precisely. It keeps your brain highly occupied with hypothetical logistical futures so that it absolutely does not have the bandwidth to process the painful, overwhelming reality of the present moment, which is the fear of failure, the grief of leaving your current home.
It's like staring at the bark on a single tree so you don't have to look at the terrifying size of the forest.
That is a beautiful way to put it. In the short term, worry gives you the illusion of control. But in the long term, it doesn't actually solve the core problem. It consumes massive amounts of cognitive energy, and it ironically increases your baseline anxiety over time.
Because you are constantly practicing the habit of anticipating disaster.
Exactly. You're training your brain to see threats everywhere.
Okay, there is one final category in our taxonomy of hiding. We've gone from physical flight to subtle behaviors to retreating into our minds. The last one is the use of safety signals.
Safety signals, yes.
Hmm.
These are external objects or sometimes specific people that you essentially use as a psychological crutch.
Okay, like an adult security blanket.
Basically, you carry them with you or bring them along specifically to help you feel more comfortable and to act as an insurance policy against an emotion becoming overwhelming.
Like someone who has a fear of flying carrying a good luck charm in their pocket.
Yes.
They know rationally that a rabbit's foot doesn't keep a commercial airliner in the sky, but feeling it in their pocket reduces their panic.
Right. Or, more practically, carrying an anti-anxiety medication in your purse everywhere you go, not because you actually take it, but just having it there, quote unquote, just in case.
A psychological safety net.
Exactly. Or always having a water bottle in your hand in social situations to give you something to do with your hands and a reason to pause before speaking.
Or bringing a safety person to an uncomfortable situation. Like if you are deeply introverted and anxious, you might only agree to go to networking events if your highly extroverted, charismatic best friend comes with you to act as a buffer.
We see that all the time. The problem with safety signals, though, is the superstitious learning they create.
Superstitious learning.
Yes. If you survive a turbulent flight while gripping your good luck charm, or you survive the networking event because your friend did all the talking, what does your brain learn?
My brain learns that I only survived because of the charm, or because of my friend. I didn't actually survive it on my own.
Exactly. You attribute your safety to the external signal, not to your own internal resilience. You rob yourself of the opportunity to build confidence.
And that perfectly sets up the crucial mechanism underlying all of this. We've laid out this massive menu of avoidance tactics.
Right, from leaving the room to holding a water bottle.
The central question is, why do we keep doing them? If these behaviors ultimately make our life smaller, if they damage our relationships, if they exhaust us mentally, why are they so incredibly hard to stop?
To understand the cycle of maintenance, we need to look at the ruthless mathematics of human psychology.
Okay.
Short-term relief always overrides long-term cost in the primitive brain.
It's the ultimate lack of foresight.
It truly is. Think about it like physical pain. Imagine you are in agonizing, blinding physical pain from an injury.
Like a broken leg.
Yes. A doctor walks in, hands you a button, and says, if you push this button, a dose of pain medication will hit your bloodstream and the pain will vanish immediately.
I'm pushing the button.
But wait, the doctor says, however, you should know that pushing this button will eventually cause severe, debilitating side effects a year from now.
Oh.
When that pain spikes to a 10 out of 10, what are you going to do?
I mean, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to slam my hand on that button.
Yeah.
Every single time. I won't even think about a year from now. The pain is right now.
Of course you are. The reinforcement is instantaneous. When an emotional behavior, whether it's yelling at your partner, leaving the party, or perfectly formatting a spreadsheet, produces an immediate reduction in intense emotional pain, that neural pathway is massively reinforced.
It's like a reward.
Yes, your brain logs it as a highly successful survival strategy. The next time you feel that specific discomfort, the gravitational pull to engage in the behavior that worked last time will be overwhelmingly strong.
But hold on, I don't buy the pain pill analogy entirely.
Okay, why not?
Because it assumes the avoidance behavior always feels like a relief.
I see where you're going.
When I sit awake at 3 a.m., obsessing over a mistake I made in a meeting, staring at the ceiling, my heart racing, that doesn't feel like a soothing pain pill. It feels like absolute torture. It feels actively destructive in the moment.
It does.
So why would my brain fiercely reinforce a behavior that makes me utterly miserable in the short term, too?
That is a profound challenge to the model, and it's a dynamic we see constantly in clinical settings.
So what's the answer?
The answer lies in understanding that your brain is constantly calculating the lesser of two evils. Even if the emotional behavior feels terrible, your subconscious has calculated that it feels less terrible than the alternative.
Explain that. What could possibly be worse than a 3 a.m. panic spiral?
Let's take the example of a patient who feels a deep, agonizing sense of guilt for, quote-unquote, ignoring a terrifying topic, perhaps the declining health of a parent.
Okay.
To them, refusing to worry about it feels morally irresponsible. It feels cold, so they engage in obsessive rumination about medical bills and hypothetical emergencies.
Which is miserable.
The worry is exhausting and unpleasant, yes, but it is marginally less unbearable than the crushing, identity-destroying guilt they would feel if they allowed themselves to just watch TV and forget about their sick parent for an hour.
Wow.
It is not that the worry feels good, it is that it successfully blocks out a completely intolerable alternative emotion.
That is incredibly dark, but it makes perfect sense. The brain chooses a manageable torture over an unmanageable one.
Exactly.
So we get locked in this cycle. We use our EDBs, our subtle avoidance, our worry. Let's unpack the long-term damage of this. What is the actual cost of successfully avoiding our feelings for years?
The cost is that you constantly validate a very dangerous hypothesis about yourself and the world.
What's the hypothesis?
Every time you leave the crowded room before your anxiety peaks, or every time you lash out to release tension, you are sending a powerful, undeniable message to your own nervous system. I was right. I cannot handle this emotion. The situation really is dangerous, and my only option for survival is escape.
It's like you're building a massive fortress to keep out a dragon, but the dragon isn't real.
Right.
But because you spend every day reinforcing the walls, you convince yourself the dragon must be out there, otherwise why would you be building the wall?
That's a perfect analogy. Avoidance prevents you from ever gathering data to the contrary. If you always leave the party when you feel awkward, you never give your nervous system the chance to realize that the awkwardness will eventually crest and subside on its own.
Even if you just stand there.
Yes. You never learn distress tolerance.
And so a relatively normal emotional response, like feeling nervous in a crowd, morphs into an emotional disorder. Your world just shrinks and shrinks until it only accommodates the tiny sliver of situations where you can perfectly control your feelings.
Precisely. You become a prisoner of your own comfort zone.
Let's apply this to the listener right now. Because hearing this theory is one thing, but spotting it in the mirror is another.
It's much harder to see in yourself.
Yeah. Sometimes I just genuinely prefer to stay home on a Friday night, order takeout, and read a book, rather than go to a loud, crowded bar with friends. That doesn't feel like overt avoidance. That just feels like I'm an introvert making a valid lifestyle choice.
And it very well might be.
Right. So how can you, listening to this, tell if you are engaging in subtle avoidance or if you are just living your life based on your actual personal preferences?
It is arguably the trickiest distinction to make, because avoidance loves to wear the mask of preference. We rationalize our fears into personality traits.
Oh, that's dangerous.
There is a classic clinical vignette that perfectly illustrates how to parse this out.
Let's dive into that. Put the listener in the room. Imagine a couple in therapy.
Okay.
The wife insists she just has a strong personal preference for sleeping with the bedroom windows closed and locked tight.
Right.
It's the middle of summer. It's sweltering hot. Her husband desperately wants the windows open to get a breeze, and they are locked in this recurring, bitter fight about it. Her stated rationale is simple. The birds outside are always chirping loudly at 5 a.m., and she's a light sleeper, so the noise ruins her rest.
Now, on the surface, if a friend told you that over coffee, you wouldn't blink. It sounds like a perfectly reasonable, slightly annoying personal preference. Many people require a quiet sleeping environment.
Right. It sounds completely benign. I'm a light sleeper too. But then the therapist starts gently poking at the edges of this preference. Yeah. The therapist asks why the husband is so frustrated, why he thinks she's being unreasonable, and the hidden architecture of the situation starts to emerge.
The patient reluctantly reveals that a few years prior, While living in a different ground floor apartment, they experienced a break-in.
Oh, wow.
It was deeply traumatic. Ever since that incident, she has harbored severe anxiety about someone entering their home while they are asleep.
So the therapist pivots and asks the vital, exposing question. They say, so is it possible that you close your windows at night primarily to prevent someone from breaking in, rather than just to block out the birds?
And the patient, confronted with the reality of it, admits that, yes, the terrifying thought of an intruder is the dominant force.
Even though they now live on the third floor.
Exactly. They live in a secure building, and a break-in is highly unlikely. But she feels completely incapable of relaxing enough to sleep unless everything is locked down like a vault.
This vignette is a masterclass in uncovering the function of a behavior. What looks like a preference for quiet is actually an emotionally avoided function to manage trauma-induced terror.
Exactly. The therapist helps her see that she isn't primarily avoiding the sound of birds. She is avoiding the intense physiological spike of anxiety she would experience if she felt exposed to the night air.
The therapist uses this great investigative technique of teasing out the what-ifs and the history.
Yeah.
They ask, before the break-in happened years ago, did you care if the windows were open?
And the patient realizes, no, she used to sleep with them open all the time, completely unbothered by outside noise.
So the true function of the behavior is entirely about managing fear, disguised as managing the temperature or the acoustics.
So for the listener, this is the challenge to apply to your own daily routines. Think about that one weird, highly specific quirk you have.
Yeah, we all have one.
Maybe you absolutely refuse to sit with your back to the door at a restaurant. You tell your friends it's just a personal preference, you like seeing the room.
Or maybe you refuse to delegate simple tasks to your junior employees because you quote-unquote prefer the way you format the spreadsheets.
If I forced you to violate that preference, what exactly would happen? If I made you sit in the middle of the restaurant facing the wall, or if I forced you to hit send on a report someone else formatted without checking it, what would you feel?
Panic.
Yes. If the mere thought of violating that preference causes a sudden spike in anxiety, panic, or intense irritability, you are likely not dealing with a preference.
You are managing a hidden vulnerability.
Exactly. It is a subtle safety signal or cognitive avoidance. It's a playful but profoundly serious challenge to audit your own life.
Because once you identify that a behavior is actually a false alarm avoidance tactic maintaining your distress, well, you are faced with the terrifying challenge of changing it.
The hardest part.
And this is where almost everyone, myself included, makes a critical, incredibly natural mistake. When we realize a habit is bad, our immediate instinct is to just decide to stop doing it.
Which is neurologically impossible. And it brings us to one of the most famous psychological experiments of the 20th century, which perfectly illustrates the absolute trap of trying to do nothing.
Before you explain the science behind it, I want to run a mini version of this experiment with the listener right now.
Let's do it.
It's quick, but it's visceral. Wherever you are listening to this, in your car, on a walk, washing dishes, I want you to pause and think of a memory that is genuinely embarrassing for you. Something that makes you physically cringe. Bring it fully to mind. Picture the room. Who was there?
Yeah.
What you said, that hot feeling in your cheeks.
Give them a second to find one. We all have plenty.
Yeah, you have it. Okay, now for the next 60 seconds, well, not literally 60 seconds, but starting now, absolutely under no circumstances, do not think about that memory. Try to think about anything else in the world. Your grocery list, the plot of a movie, the weather. But do not let that embarrassing memory cross your mind, even for a microsecond. Starting now.
If you are experiencing what nearly every human mind experiences, you are finding this remarkably difficult.
It's impossible.
In fact, you're probably hyperfixated on that embarrassing memory in a way you haven't been in years. The harder you push it down, the more aggressively it surfaces.
It is infuriatingly difficult. It's like trying to hold an inflated beach ball underwater. It takes massive, constant effort, and the second you slip, it explodes to the surface.
Exactly.
And this isn't just a quirk of our audience, it's a rigorously documented phenomenon. Let's talk about the original 1987 experiment by Wagner and Schneider on mental control.
This is universally referred to as the white bear task.
Mm.
The researchers brought participants into a lab and gave them a seemingly simple instruction.
Think about anything.
Right. Think about absolutely anything you want. Talk into this tape recorder about whatever comes to mind with one single unbreakable rule. Do not think of a white bear.
And the result was a spectacular failure of human willpower.
Utter failure. Participants thought about white bears constantly. They would talk about a vacation and then suddenly mention a white bear. The experiment highlighted the paradoxical effects of thought suppression, which is a form of emotional behavior.
Because you're trying to suppress an emotion.
Right. When you attempt to forcefully suppress a thought or an emotion, you reliably end up increasing the frequency and intensity of the very thing you are trying to eradicate.
But why does our brain betray us like that? What is the actual mechanical friction happening in our heads?
It is a problem of monitoring. To be absolutely sure that you are successfully complying with the rule, am I successfully not thinking about the white bear? Or am I successfully not feeling anxious? Part of your brain has to act as a security guard.
Okay, a security guard.
This guard has to periodically scan your consciousness to check for intruders.
Right, so the guard knocks on the door and says, hey, just checking, are we thinking about the embarrassing memory?
Precisely. But the very act of the guard asking the question introduces the concept back into your active working memory. To check if the memory is there, you have to recall the parameters of the memory.
That is so frustrating.
It is. The monitoring mechanism guarantees you will think about the thing you are trying to avoid.
It's like setting an incredibly loud alarm clock to wake you up every 10 minutes, just to remind yourself that you are trying to get a good night's sleep. The tool you are using to enforce the rule is the exact thing destroying the goal.
And patients will often argue this point. They will claim they can successfully suppress thoughts, but when you examine how they do it, they are putting immense, exhausting amounts of cognitive effort into aggressive distraction.
Like what?
Like counting backwards from 1,007s, reciting poetry loudly in their heads. It takes up 90% of their mental bandwidth.
You can't live like that.
You can't. And clinically, this is impossible to sustain in the real world. The moment they get tired or the distraction stops, the suppressed thought rebounds with terrifying intensity.
So what is the practical takeaway for us? It means you cannot break an emotional behavior by simply deciding to stop doing it.
No, you can't.
You cannot replace an established behavioral neural pathway with a void. You cannot go from doing something to doing nothing.
Exactly. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the human brain. You must actively replace the maladaptive behavior with a constructive action. You have to go from doing something to doing something else.
And that profound realization leads us finally to the antidote, the core strategy of countering these habits, designing alternative actions.
Yes. An alternative action is defined as deliberately engaging in a physical or cognitive action that is different and, crucially, often the direct opposite of what your action tendency urges you to do when experiencing a strong emotion.
It's a conscious, effortful choice to rewrite the software of your physical response.
Exactly.
Let's make this tangible. I want to walk through some of the most common emotional flashpoints we all experience and contrast the automatic behavior with the alternative action.
Perfect.
Let's start with anger.
Anger is universal. Imagine you are driving home, you are exhausted, and someone recklessly cuts you off in heavy traffic, nearly causing an accident.
Your system floods with adrenaline.
Instantly. The action tendency, the evolutionary urge, is to fight. The emotional behavior might be screaming at the windshield, laying on the horn, gripping the steering wheel until your knuckles are white, or even tailgating them aggressively.
The short-term result is you vent the anger, you feel righteous. But the long-term result is your nervous system stays redlined, you arrive home vibrating with rage, you snap at your family, and you physically maintain the anger for hours.
Yes, you keep the fire burning.
So, knowing the white bear rule, I can't just grip the wheel and tell myself, don't be angry, do nothing. What is the alternative action?
The alternative action must be physically and behaviorally incompatible with the physiological state of anger.
Incompatible, okay.
Anger escalates your physiology. Your alternative must downregulate it. Instead of yelling, which tightens your vocal cords and chest, you force yourself to speak out loud in a slow, even, almost boring tone.
I'm driving my car. The car is blue.
Exactly. If your impulse is to clench your fists, the direct physical opposite is to splay your fingers wide open and let your hands rest loosely on your lap or the bottom of the wheel.
You are sending an overriding physical signal to your brain that says, look at my hands, look at my breathing. We are not going to war right now. Turn off the alarm.
Exactly. Or, as one of the most effective behavioral suggestions notes, simply start singing along with the radio.
I love that one. Singing requires controlled exhales, which lowers your heart rate, And it replaces aggressive verbal output with melodic, structured verbal output.
Yeah.
You literally cannot scream and rage and sing a pop song effectively at the same time. You are doing something else.
It's mechanically impossible to do both.
Okay, let's pivot to sadness. The natural action tendency for profound sadness is to withdraw, pull the covers over your head, cancel plans, and avoid the world.
Right. And if the maladaptive behavior is withdrawal and isolation, the alternative action must be forced approach and engagement.
Even if you don't feel like it.
Especially if you don't feel like it. If your instinct is to cancel a dinner with a friend, the alternative is to not only go to the dinner, but to actively ask them questions. If your instinct is to put on a playlist of devastatingly sad music to lean into the melancholia, the alternative is to put on upbeat, high-tempo music, even if it feels jarring at first.
And my absolute favorite one for sadness.
Hmm.
If you are walking down the street and your emotional behavior is to stare at the pavement, hunch your shoulders, and avoid making eye contact with anyone.
Yes.
The alternative action is to lift your chin and intentionally make direct eye contact with three strangers. It forces you to connect with the external world rather than collapsing into your own internal void.
It changes your posture, which changes your neurochemistry. Now let's look at guilt or shame, which are incredibly physically restrictive emotions.
Oh, definitely.
When people feel deep shame, they essentially try to make themselves invisible. They maintain a hunched, closed-off posture, they speak very softly or mumble, and they avoid taking up space.
The physical manifestation of wanting the floor to swallow you whole.
Precisely. Therefore, the alternative action is physical and interpersonal expansion.
Expansion, like making yourself bigger.
Yes, you force yourself to sit up rigidly straight, pulling your shoulders back. You use a full, clear, projected voice instead of a whisper. You make sustained eye contact. And most importantly, you actively resist the overwhelming urge to apologize obsessively.
Right, the apologizing EDB we talked about earlier.
Exactly. You apologize clearly and sincerely exactly one time, and then you force yourself to move on.
It is about acting completely counter to the emotional pull. Now, I want to bring up another clinical scenario because it deals with an emotion that is so prevalent in high-achieving environments. Anxiety.
Okay.
And it deals with a behavior that society almost universally praises. Over-preparing.
Ah, yes. This is a classic, deeply challenging example of how tricky and rationalized these behaviors can be.
Imagine a professional who has to give a quarterly presentation. They spend an excessive, grueling amount of time preparing. They rehearse it 50 times, they memorize every slide, they script out answers for every conceivable question.
Sounds like a dedicated employee.
Right, if you confront them, they argue, I'm just being professional. I'm avoiding the possibility of making a mistake. Isn't that the whole point of a good work ethic? Maybe my anxiety is actually my superpower.
And this is where the therapist must step in to ruthlessly examine the function of the behavior rather than just the optics of it.
Because preparation is generally a good thing.
Preparation, in moderation, is highly adaptive. But the therapist will agree that avoiding mistakes is good, but then ask, is spending 30 hours preparing for a 15-minute internal update reasonable or proportionate to the threat?
And if the patient is honest, they admit it's complete overkill.
Mm.
But they cannot stop themselves from doing it.
Why? Because when pressed, the patient confesses the real fear. I am terrified that when I stand up there, I will feel a wave of anxiety, my mind will go completely, catastrophically blank, and I will stand there in humiliating silence, unable to continue.
Boom. There's the false alarm. The threat isn't the presentation material. The threat is the feeling of anxiety itself.
It is brilliant self-protective architecture. Going into a presentation totally unprepared is a bad strategy. But at this extreme level, the function of the behavior has nothing to do with the content. The function is to construct an impenetrable armor of memorization against the physical sensation of anxiety.
They over-prepare so they can essentially go on autopilot, thereby guaranteeing they won't have to actually manage their emotions in real time.
Correct. And what is the long-term consequence of this?
They burn out.
They burn out, yes. But also, by over-preparing to the point of exhaustion every single time, they prevent themselves from ever learning a crucial lesson. That even if they did lose their train of thought, even if they did feel a spike of anxiety at the podium, they are smart enough and resilient enough to handle it, recover, and move on.
Oh, I see.
They attribute 100% of their professional success to their obsessive, soul-crushing preparation and 0% to their innate competence.
So what is the alternative action for an over-preparer? You can't just tell an anxious professional to walk into a boardroom and wing it completely. That would induce sheer panic.
No. The alternative is introducing strict, uncomfortable boundaries. You set a rigid time limit. You decide, I will prepare for exactly 2 hours on Thursday. When the timer goes off, I will close the laptop and I will physically leave the building and go see a movie.
You are forcing yourself to step into the arena feeling 80% prepared instead of 150% prepared, thereby forcing yourself to tolerate the uncertainty.
Exactly.
But let's be real. If someone has spent 10 years managing their anxiety through over-preparation, telling them to cut their prep time by 80% might send them into an absolute tailspin. The idea of doing the extreme opposite can sometimes feel so impossible that people just give up on the alternative action entirely. How do we troubleshoot that?
That is a very common roadblock. If the alternative action feels insurmountable, we use a technique called scaling the extreme opposite. It is a way of building an emotional bridge.
Okay, let's use the example of severe social avoidance. Say someone avoids all interactions with strangers at parties because they are terrified of sounding foolish.
Severe overt avoidance.
Right. The absolute most extreme opposite action would be to walk into a crowded room, march up to the most intimidating, attractive group of people there, and initiate a loud, 20-minute conversation about politics.
Which, for someone with clinical social anxiety, is equivalent to asking them to jump out of a plane without a parachute. They will flatly refuse, and they will feel like a failure for refusing.
Right, so you have to scale it back. What is a less extreme version of approach? What is the baby step that still qualifies as an alternative action?
The scaled alternative action might be incredibly small, but profoundly meaningful. It might be go to the party, walk up to the edge of a group of people and simply stand there. Do not speak. Do not initiate. Just stand physically near them for 5 minutes without looking at your phone.
That is brilliant. It's still an alternative action because you are going from total avoidance, hiding in the bathroom or not attending, to a physical form of approach.
Yes, you are exposing your nervous system to the trigger. You are standing there, feeling your heart race, feeling the heat in your face. And critically, you are proving to your primitive brain that the catastrophic outcome, spontaneous combustion, or everyone pointing and laughing at you, does not actually happen.
You survived it.
You survive. And once you master the distress tolerance of just standing there, you scale up. The next week, you make eye contact and smile. The week after that, you say hello. It is a deliberate, step-by-step process of neurological rewiring.
It's exactly like progressive overload in weightlifting. You don't walk into a gym on day one and try to deadlift 400 pounds. You will break your back. You start with an empty bar. You are progressively building the muscle of distress tolerance.
That is the perfect analogy. You are slowly, incrementally teaching your body that it can survive the things it is most afraid of.
Okay, we have covered a massive, sprawling amount of ground today. We've climbed all the way up the stairs to the 3rd floor of this house of mental skills. We need to synthesize this journey. We started with the foundational realization that our emotions are ancient, hardwired biological systems. They come with built-in action tendencies. Running from a literal bear is a perfect system. It keeps you alive.
But our behavioral reactions have become outdated software in the modern world. When we react to a psychological false alarm, a difficult conversation with a partner, a crowded room, an ambiguous email from a boss with those same primal survival behaviors, we build our own cages.
We do. We deploy these incredibly sneaky tactics. We use emotion-driven behaviors to frantically scratch the itch. We use overt avoidance to physically hide. We use subtle avoidance to check out while remaining in the room. We use cognitive avoidance, especially worry, to build firewalls in our own minds. And we use safety signals as superstitious crutches.
And they all work in the short term.
They all give us that immediate hit of pain medication, but they guarantee long-term suffering by constantly confirming our deepest, darkest fears that we are fundamentally incapable of handling the reality of our own lives.
And we learned through the white bear experiment that sheer suppression is a failed, paradoxical strategy. You cannot simply decide to do nothing.
You have to choose deliberate, conscious alternative actions. You must replace the void. If your instinct is to withdraw, you must approach. If your instinct is to yell, you must speak softly. If your instinct is to over-prepare, you must introduce uncertainty. By doing this, we literally rewrite the physical code of our own emotional lives. We prove to our nervous systems that we are stronger than the false alarms.
It is a profound, life-altering shift in perspective. But before we conclude this deep dive, there is one final, almost counterintuitive twist regarding everything we've discussed that we absolutely must address. We have spent this entire time talking about avoiding negative emotions. We've talked about fear, anger, profound sadness, debilitating guilt, and anxiety.
Right, the heavy stuff, the uncomfortable stuff.
But did you know that human beings, using the exact same mechanisms we've discussed, frequently engage in emotional behaviors to avoid positive emotions?
Wait, what? People actively avoid feeling happy. Why on earth would anyone do that? Joy feels good. Excitement feels good. There's no pain medication needed for joy.
It sounds absurd on the surface, but clinically, these concepts apply flawlessly to positive emotions. Many people, particularly those who have experienced trauma or who suffer from chronic low-level depression, report an intense, almost physical difficulty in allowing themselves to experience unfiltered positive emotions like profound joy, excitement, or deep pride.
But why? What is the false alarm ringing when you feel happy?
Because for a brain that is conditioned to expect disaster, joy is the ultimate vulnerability. When you are deeply happy, your guard is down. The false alarm is the belief that if you allow yourself to feel truly, expansively happy, something terrible is inevitably going to come along and rip that happiness away from you. It's the classic phenomenon of waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Oh, wow. That hits incredibly hard.
They calculate the emotional math, and their subconscious decides that the contrast, the devastating fall from a peak of happiness back down into the valley of despair, is actually perceived as more painful and dangerous than simply staying numb or staying slightly depressed all the time. Numbness becomes a predictable, safe baseline.
So they use the exact same taxonomy of avoidance we just talked about, but they aim it at their own joy. They might use subtle avoidance, like making a cynical or snide comment during a beautiful, intimate moment to undercut the enjoyment, or cognitive avoidance, instantly distracting themselves with worries about tomorrow when they get good news today so they don't get too excited.
Exactly. They are trying to preemptively manage the potential disappointment of losing the joy by ensuring they never fully possess the joy in the first place. They apply the exact same mechanisms of self-sabotage to happiness as they do to fear. It is a tragic, deeply restrictive, but entirely understandable defense mechanism once you see the logic behind it.
That is just staggering. It completely flips the script on how we view self-sabotage and happiness. It's not that we don't know how to be happy, it's that we are terrified of the vulnerability of it.
It highlights just how powerful and how indiscriminate our drive to manage and control our emotional reality truly is. We will sacrifice our own peaks of joy just to avoid the possibility of the fall.
That is an immense amount to process.
Yeah.
But it's exactly why we take the time to do these deep dives. So I want to leave you, listening right now, with that final piercing thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your day or your week. We've talked extensively about the bears and the bosses and the white bears you can't stop checking on, but look closely at the good moments too.
They matter just as much.
When something wonderful happens, pay attention to your immediate physical reaction. Do you lean into it, or do you instantly brace for impact? Are you subconsciously avoiding your own happiness just to stay safe? Are you waiting for the other shoe to drop instead of just allowing yourself to enjoy the music?
It's worth asking yourself.
Start noticing your own action tendencies in the real world. Notice the subtle ways you scratch the itch when you're frustrated, or how you check your phone when you feel exposed, or how you weaponize your own perfectionism. Because once you finally see these false alarms for what they truly are, just outdated biological software, you finally have the power to stop running. You have the power to choose an alternative action. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of your emotions. We'll see you next time.